One of the most difficult questions that I faced as an intellectual thinker and writer is the question of how do you improve a person's mental capacity? How essentially do you improve the mind? It's very, very difficult to answer this question, I found, because it seems that according to certain thinkers in the scientific realm, the answer is biological enhancements and modifications. And I don't think that that's the answer. Part of the reason why I don't think that's the answer is because the mind is a special entity, and the mind includes thought. And how do you really regulate thoughts? And basically that's what you would be trying to do with modifications and enhancements, is essentially regulate thought. And I don't think that that's particularly helpful, especially when looking at the mind as a separate entity. Of course, that evokes Descartes and his idea of dualism, the split between the mind and the body. But I think it's an important distinction to make because it really puts emphasis on what the mind does and what the mind can do. I haven't been able to answer the question of how do you improve the capacity of your mind, partially because I don't know the science of the brain, but also because I'm not fully convinced that modifications and biological enhancements and even understanding the biology of the brain and the neurobiology is the answer. And I think that because the mind is mysterious and the mind is elusive, maybe that means I don't understand the science as well as some people do. But I personally think that it is a basic philosophical problem. And that philosophical problem is, how does a person or a being study themselves when they are themselves the subject? So in other words, how can you look at yourself and your brain and your mind objectively? I think those are important questions to ask. Now, of course, when it comes to thinking about improving the capacity of the mind, there are movies like Lucy that illustrate via storytelling and plot and images ideas about mind capacity and improving mind capacity. And I'm personally taken by such depictions because it shows just how powerful the mind can be with the right enhancements. And even though I am not sure where I stand as involves biological enhancements, though I would say that that's definitely not the answer, I would insist on that. I do think that Lucy is important for illustrating the complexities of improving the brain, improving the mind. And so basically the how isn't as important as the what. I think that trying to figure out how to improve the mind is a hard question, partially because we don't understand the brain very well. But I think it's also because there's definitely a lot that goes into thinking itself and thought itself. But I think that one thing that we can use to try to push forward and to try to push ourselves forward is to understand the idea of the Übermensch as postulated by Friedrich Nietzsche. And that would be the idea of the Superman and having an ideal to strive for. And what would we look like as a Superman? That's the question that we have to answer with this powerful ideal to strive for. So if we started as chimps and simple monkeys, then how would a chimp look as a Superman? How would a Superman look at a chimp, right? So these are the important questions that we ask. In conclusion, I would say I don't really have an answer to how we improve the capacity of the excuse me, how we improve the capacity of the mind. But I certainly think that part of the key, even if there is evidence for biological enhancement, I think a lot of it is also simply possible because of thought itself, and how we improve thought, and how we force our minds and our minds as an abstract entity to be more powerful than it wants to be, and to use thoughts in very calculated and precise ways. I think it's difficult, but I think that it can be done. And this is why I evoke the idea of the Ubermensch. This is why I insist that it's not all about modifications, because that's just an easy way out of really thinking your way through a specific place. And even though I've upset some people philosophically and conceptually by saying that I think it all comes back to thought and it all comes back to the mind, I insist that that is the truth, at least when it comes to the philosophy of mind, and I maintain that thesis. I hope you enjoyed this talk. This is Phoenix, and thank you.